This is the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores why one wants to be in the D. I am your host, Fyodor Ship III, the director of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. Join me as I interview students, scholars, leaders, and innovators about living, working, and loving in Detroit. Today's guest was convicted of accessory to murder and sentenced as a teenager to life without parole. His unwavering hope led him to continue his education during his incarceration. He completed his high school diploma and obtained an associate's degree in paralegal services from Jackson College and a bachelor's degree in behavioral science from Spring Arbor University. He was a real jailhouse lawyer, saving others by filing legal documents and motions on their behalf. After serving over 42 years in prison, he went on to earn his master's degree from the University of Michigan School of Social Work. He is now working to outline ways to make the criminal justice system fairer and more effective for everyone. The DDP welcomes Edward Baraka Sanders.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome back, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you coming back. We've had Edward on before, but due to some technical issues, we had to bring him back, and we're very grateful for your willingness to come back. So the first question was, you were a gang leader in your youth.
Yes.
Tell me what that was like.
Well, for about maybe 2 years, 2.5 years, I took and acted as a leader of a gang, and I actually took in kind of like as a default. My brother had a gang as well, and when he took and got arrested and was in custody, I kind of took and put the two together. And so we wind up with both the Linwood and East Side players. And that was for about maybe 1.5 years, possibly 2 years. So, and that was before my arrest. And the unique thing is that I accepted, that was the wrong path. And so even before I had got incarcerated, I had heeded some advice from someone in the community to to cease, and we was in the process of taking and turning the game over into a legitimate club, and we were meeting regularly on Detroit's northwest side off of Woodrow Wilson and Davidson. We was meeting in the office of a gentleman by the name of Richard Berry, who was president of, I believe, a neighborhood city hall in Detroit, and he was an employee at the time of Coleman Young, and he had experience having worked with youth gangs before, and himself having been in a street gang. And I used to tell him, I couldn't imagine you being in a street gang. I guess now I'm in his position, where if a kid seen me today, they wouldn't imagine that. And I'm grateful for that. And that 1.5 years or 2 years don't take and define who I am as a person.
Okay. So what were the circumstances that led to you going to prison?
I was operating a vehicle where someone shot out from the back of the vehicle and killed another person. And when I was investigated, or when the police took and came and questioned me about it, they was very clear that they knew that I hadn't killed anyone, but they was certain that I knew who did, and they was asking me for my cooperation. As a youth, I was very belligerent, and I demonstrated it in that moment. And their response to me was that they would make sure that I do a lot of time, that they was going to make sure that I do a lot of time. And most of what came out in the courtroom was them making sure that I did a lot of time. I served 43.5 years in Michigan prison. I went to prison at the age of 17 in 1975, and I didn't return home or from custody until 2017. So they remained true to that position. They initially arrested another youth for the actual killing, and they subsequently, after having arrested that youth for the crime, they gave that youth full immunity to testify against another youth who supposedly been the principal, and I being the aider and abettor. And that youth who they relied on as being their, trustworthy informant, defendant turned informant, is now sitting in a prison in Indiana, not for one homicide, not for two homicides, but for three homicides. So, if you want to take and bet on that type of testimony, that subsequently, even after having been arrested previously for murder, and even after having been given immunity for his testimony and denying that he was the person that was responsible, then go right ahead and put your confidence in it. But I don't think the people in Indiana hold that same position that the prosecutor's office here in Wayne County may hold.
Okay. So how did you spend your time when you were away?
I took in quite early. I made some very substantial decisions, and that was that I wouldn't no longer was going to be associated with anything that was immoral or indecent, or anything that had anything to do with gang. So I didn't go into prison taking and represent myself as a gang leader. I could have done that, but I chose that I wouldn't do that. And I did everything I can to take and not only disassociate myself from that role, but I made sure that the behaviorism that's relevant to that role was, eradicated. So I no longer would allow myself to think like that, to feel like that, to act upon those type of behaviorism. I can even remember when I would get into physical confrontations, I will make it very clear that I didn't want anyone in my business. That if I and someone else had a fist fight, that's all it is a fist fight, and leave it at that. I knew quite a few people when I went into prison that were older than me, that was my age, like my game. There were guys in my game, even though I was the 16, 17-year-old kid, there was guys in my game that was as old as 23, 24, 25 years old. So I knew some people when I got into the prison system, but I made it clear to everyone that if I got into it with somebody, that was an incident between me and that person. It wasn't to go any farther than that. And that type of decision allowed me to break myself away from any kind of, resolving things through some group, through some gang activity.
Okay. And so, what were the circumstances that led to your release?
The United States Supreme Court made a succession of rulings, decisions in regards to children and the punishment that children receive as a result of their behaviors during their adolescence. They made one ruling early on that concerned the children that was on death row, and those children were children who were mentally ill. And they also addressed the children who wasn't mentally ill that was on death row. The United States Supreme Court took and said that a death penalty for a child was too excessive, no matter what they had did. And then subsequently, they made a ruling in regards of children who were serving life without parole that in non-homicide offense, and they said that was wrong. There was a kid, I believe, by the name of Graham in Florida that had been literally convicted for probation violation. And the judge was so outraged that he had come right back before the court so soon. The judge decided to take and teach him a lesson by giving him life in prison. And Florida subsequently took and abolished this parole board system. And so that life became life without parole. So he was doing, this little 14, 15, 16-year-old kid was doing as much time as a hardened serial killer, And the United States Supreme Court was more outraged than that trial judge to take and see that that case had not only happened in a lower court, but it managed to get all the way up to the United States Supreme Court with no lower courts or intermediary courts correcting it. And so the court was like, no, no child should be sentenced to life in prison for a non-homicide offense. And then they continued with their rulings in subsequent cases. It began to include more and more of adolescents that were under 18 years old for various situations. Then the question was, well, okay, how about if a child had committed an actual murder? And the court answered that question. No, they shouldn't be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole where there's no discretion, because the courts was doing it like it was an automatic thing. If the jury say it's first degree, then it's automatically life in prison without parole, no discretion whatsoever. So the courts removed that and said you have to use some discretion. And not only did the court say you have to use some discretion, you have to also take and go back and review these kids at some point after they grow up, after they mature, because there was science that was being presented along with this law, okay? So when this law was presented, or these arguments to the courts was being presented, it wasn't just simply law, but it was being supplemented with a cross-discipline, and that cross-discipline was neuroscience. They were looking at both law and neuroscience. The neuroscience said that, hey, children, unlike the what I would call pseudoscience that was used before, because there was some pseudoscience where this guy just, even though he was on at a university campus, he used his, bias and so forth, his racism, and argued that when children take and commit an offense, they are always going to be that person, So his argument was, and you may have heard this thing about these super predators. So they built a whole theory around the idea that children were growing into super predators, and that they would be unable, that law enforcement and others would be unable to even detain them. And so they even went out so much to take and build not maximum security prisons, but super maximum security prisons. So this is a money thing, because it costs money to build big prisons like that. It put money into heavy construction, but it costs a whole lot of money to continue to run those type of facilities. Well, the theory never bore out. It costed the United States billions of dollars to build these type of prisons. These type of prisons are fit for international terrorism. We built them domestically for children with the theory, the science, a pseudoscience that supplemented it. And the United States Supreme Court, after hearing real science, took more than a step back. They took multiple steps back and say, no, these children may not be innocent of the crime, but they are definitely, in most instances, innocent of punishment that is being asserted on them. So they're saying that in most of these cases, we believe, based upon the actual science that's being presented to us, that's showing us the brain development, that these children are not only guilty for the crimes that they commit, but these children, they're corrigible. They're not incorrigible, they're corrigible. And they asked the states to go back by some means. They left it to the states to figure out how you do it, whether you do it through parole board or whether you do it through going back to the courts or whatever. They say at some point you have to go back and take a second look at those children and see whether or not they have grown out of that. And if so, you need to take and come up with some type of sanction that's relevant to that situation. So that's how I got situated. When the court made this decision, it didn't immediately affect us because prosecutors were very stubborn, and they was like, well, they kept on taking and trying to not just simply interpret what the court was saying, but to create interpolations, where they would insert their own knowledge or understanding, and they continue to get political mileage out of this. They continue to run for office out of this. And we've seen some prosecutors fall flat on their face and get thrown out of office, and other prosecutors excelled it. And so it's some political mileage in this to
Okay.
take and
Yeah,
to do this.
because we're gonna touch on that. But what after you got your release, what led you to pursue a master's in social work at Michigan?
Well, remind you, while in prison, I made a determination that I was going to take and educate myself or become educated. When I got inside of prison, I went to prison with no more than a third grade level education. My reading, my math, or whatever was about at the level of a third grade. So when I got into prison, I was taking classes in the remedial area, okay? They had they had high schools in the prison system when I got there, but by the time I got out of remedial classes, high schools was over with. The only thing that was available beyond remedial classes was a GED program. So I eventually took a GED program, got my GED, as you noted earlier, and then I got into a community college. First community college was probably Macomb Community College, which was at the Michigan Reformatory. And then I later, when I was transferred to Jackson State Prison, I got into Jackson Community College. And the inmates there, we began to take and insist upon the college to take and provide a paralegal program. And they subsequently became the leading paralegal studies program in the United States as a result of prisoners here in Michigan insisting upon paralegal studies. So Jackson Community College became the leader in paralegal studies here in Michigan as a result of prisoners' anger to take and learn about law. Okay, so I'm one of those prisoners that took advantage of the paralegal study program. After having acquired a paralegal certificate, I began to take and try to provide legal services to my fellow inmates. At the time, it was too emotional for me to even look at my own case. I was so upset with the truths and half-truths and misconceptions and everything that was in my case. I couldn't even work on my own case, but I was working on other fellow inmate cases, and it acted as, it provided a means of therapy for me to be able to take and address somebody else's injustice. And so this is how I not only got myself into law, is how I began to take and even address my own situation. There's still parts of my own case, like I still maintain my innocence. I'm not guilty for having killed anybody. I'm not guilty for having told anyone to kill somebody, but I am responsible for taking and removing a car from the scene of an argument and going back to that scene with a firearm in that car with youths who were under the influence of drugs, and one of them took and used that weapon and killed the person after we returned. I'm responsible for that, but I'm not responsible for telling that youth to take and actually have done that. The youth that took and testified, he once took and claimed that he was the one that done the shooting and that I was the one that told him to do it. But when the police got in the picture, he was like, no, I didn't do it. This other guy done it, and he told the other guy to do it. And this is how I get into it with this guy lying about his own role, and I'm still not sure. I later found evidence just before I got out of prison to suggest that gun could have been fired accidentally by what they call an inertiker firing, is where the firing pin is so heavy that's pressed on the back of the gun that if you shake it, it can take and go off. And this is how these two that was arguing on which one of them had fired the gun, both acknowledged, well, at least one of them acknowledged that the other one both of them had their hands on the gun. And the gun is of the same make and model that I took, and when I done research I found, which was an 1897 Winchester pump.
Wow.
And this pump, this particular Winchester has a long history that goes all the way back to the 1800s of misfiring. I actually found evidence of people who have been killed with the gun, of people who have been shot themselves, or one of their children shot and injured with the handling of this gun. But I have served the time, and whether rightfully or wrongfully, I'm still responsible for taking and having a gun in that car, but I'm not
So
responsible
what
for
led you
killing
to
anyone.
U of M? I mean, what made you pursue a degree in social work?
Yeah, and that was your question. I started my journey to take and learn while I was in prison, and really it didn't start in prison. It started before I got into prison, but I lost that interest somewhere along the way, and it was rekindled in the county jail. I interacted with former veterans that was in the county jail, and these were people who had acquired drug addictions after having come home from the war, and they were in and out. They was the constant recidivists in and out of the county jail, but they knew about law. They knew how to sit down and write briefs and motions and writs, and I would sit down and watch them and inquire, and I took that curiosity back to prison with me when I got in prison, and it didn't stop. It didn't stop. And by the time I got out of prison, I was doing the same thing. It didn't stop. I was still, my thirst to take and acquire knowledge and to give it an application was continuous. As you noted, I was a jailhouse attorney. Well, since I come home, I have worked it with the prosecutor's office in one of Michigan's few CIE units, the Conviction Integrity Unit. But this one is that I worked it for was also inclusive of an expungement unit. So I have worked with people in the community through this, through the Washington County Prosecutor's Office, and helping people who have formerly been convicted or and sentenced and served time in prison to have their criminal records expunged after they have been out of prison and been out of trouble for a significant period of time. I have investigated actual homicide cases. I've investigated other serious felony cases. In fact, even though I'm not working with the Washington County Prosecutor Office, one of the very first cases that I helped my supervisor work on, a gentleman was released from prison just probably a little more than a month ago. A young man was released from prison, and I had investigated that case as well. I spoke with other people that had gave testimony and was recanting their testimony. Took and spoke with other individuals, where the victim in the crime, the person that had actually been robbed. We spoke to this person. We went and looked at the scene of the crime, and we took photographs and measurements, and and it was unique. It is unique taken from where I was in prison, taking and demanding records that you could never really get, and then being in a prosecutor's office, even though we were, bridged off from interacting with the prosecutors, because we playing, Monday morning quarterback of their plays. And but I had access. Nothing stopped me. I can walk downstairs any time of the day or night and go in the evidence room and pull out a box and begin to take a look at what was there. I've seen boxes of people I actually served time with in prison. So that was a unique experience. So I'm very thankful for that learning.
So what, if anything, was the most challenging aspect of your time in the School of Social Work?
That's a good question. When I got there, I had no digital literacy skills. No digital literacy skills. So these skill sets that you guys have been born with, where y'all like, these telephones, these pads and desktops and laptops and tablets. I had no ability with none of this stuff, and that's literally it just ruined my first year at the school. And by the time I got my act together, if you goofed up that first semester, next semester you're on probation. That wasn't nice, because I was looking better during the second semester, and I didn't like to get that notice that, hey, you're on probation. That wasn't a good feeling after you had got out of. And I can remember two of the instructors had literally alerted the school to my struggling with this. And I don't believe it was did in good faith. And I felt like I was before a prison administration hearing to determine whether or not I go to administration segregation, which is the hold, or go back to general population. It felt like that. I was just surrounded with a bunch of people, asking me questions about my activity, et cetera, and it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good at all. But I didn't let them off the hook. They was like, hey, you don't have to graduate at this date. You can take and drop a few classes and do A, B, and C. So no, that would let you off the hook. If a student come here and don't have these skill sets, this is a major university. You should have the resources available. You should make the resources available. So I stuck to my gun. I wasn't going to let them off the hook, and I wasn't going to give myself an easy pass. I come to find out, which I didn't know, they had IT. They had some of the services I was feeling that they needed to get, but those services weren't made readily available to me. No one assumed that if you show up in grad school that you wouldn't have these skill sets. Everybody expect that you would have got that in grade school. If not grade school, you would have got it in undergrad. But you wouldn't have gotten to grad school without those skills. Yeah. And that's where I showed up in grad school, without those skills. And I made it very clear to all my instructors, this subject, I know this subject. I can deal with this. I can master this. It's just this I don't know anything about, but you shouldn't put this as a barrier against me. And then I had some great teachers that validated that for me. Sit me down and look me right in the eye and say, look, you didn't come to school here to learn how to take and do digital literacy. You came here to learn social work. And if you can do that, you're going to excel in my class. And so I was asked, tell me what this class is about. And on the spur, I was able to take and articulate for every last one of my instructors what that class was about. And I remember one of the very ones that put a request in on me, they had wanted me to take and demonstrate something, and it dealt with taking and being able to use a device on the internet or on one of these devices, and I couldn't do it. But when I was asked to give assignment to explain this application and how it's used and everything, I articulated on the drop of a dime, and the person was like, well, who told you that? Because they was being dependent on this, and I didn't need that to take and understand what they were articulating and what they were saying this app was supposed to be used for. I didn't need that to take and understand that. It's still an idea, it's still a concept, and I was quite capable of putting my head around that idea and that concept. But in any case, most of the teachers were very supportive and nourishing, and like always, I'm in love with my teachers. I love people who are capable of influencing the mind, and so I love it. So I love my teachers, whether I met them in prison or I met them since I've been out here.
Okay. And since you've completed your degree, what have you been doing?
As I mentioned to you, I worked at the Washington County Prosecutor's Office in their Conviction, Integrity, and Expungement Unit as a paralegal. Before I went there, I immediately got a job right after graduating from the School of Social Work. I went over to the University of Michigan School of Information, and I worked it there as a research assistant. And so I worked it on at least 2 projects. One was with returning citizens and digital literacy, how they apply digital literacy skills to take and search for jobs. And so, excuse me, I'm hitting your microphone. So we did that. So we did research around that, and we also had a project where I was the code leader of recruitment for formerly incarcerated juvenile lifers to take and get their story. The young lady who I was working up under, who is a PhD candidate at the School of Information, we was already dealing with the pandemic, and then she had death in her family, so she had to take and go home and resolve some matters relevant to her her grandmother, her mother's estate, and so by the time she came back, she had to take and do some catch up with some of her work that she was doing at the school, and so she had to do her primary focus, which is to take and secure her PhD. And she should be graduating this January. So we didn't finish this project that we had started and put a lot of work into in terms of acquiring the oral history and so forth for former juvenile lifers. And I'm pretty much in contact with not only former juvenile lifers here in Michigan, but throughout this country. I belong to a national organization that works with former juvenile lifers and taking and trying to help provide resources, etc. Even working with us on this campaign to abolish life in prison without parole, which I mentioned to you, the Committee for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. Yeah. They campaign around abolishing extreme sentencing practices for children. And then there's a sister organization, ICANN, which takes and provides services, workshops, etc. The very things that the prosecutors here in Michigan and other places was using as excuses. Well, what they're going to do if we let them out? Well, you should be doing what these people are doing. Help, quit taking and doing harmful things like referring to children as child murderers and things like that, and get involved in some of the social work.
Well, that's a good point. So one of the things that I recall you saying in previous conversations was you got heavily involved in the politics of sheriff's races. You taken an interest into sheriff races and how sheriffs can better impact society and crime in terms of the services they offer, how they choose to enforce laws and things of that nature. Tell me more about that work.
Yes. When I got involved with some of the grassroots organizations here in Detroit and in Michigan, they were all focused on the legislative branch of government. And my position was that we need to focus on some of the local officials, and that even though the legislate laws, and sometimes it's difficult to hold 200 or more people accountable, it's more difficult or complicated to do that than it is to take and hold a single person in a local community. And that those persons can take and they have some discretion, and they can use that discretion. And so my position was not just simply with a sheriff's run, but even that of a local prosecutor or a local judge. Many of these individuals are normally elected by people simply voting down party line. People tend to not be concerned about who's the local sheriff. People tend not to be concerned about who's the local judge. They tend to be not to be concerned about these things, but we have to, because they can cause more injury. They can cause more injury in our local community than a state legislative body. Sure, a state legislative body can commit laws, and those laws don't take and serve us well. But a local prosecutor, like say in the case where we had a young lady here that ran for the county prosecutor here in Wayne County. She didn't succeed. The incumbent won again, but her challenger is now over in Washtenaw County, and we're seeing all sorts of creative things that she's doing. I met her in a church in the basement in Detroit before she ran for office. When I was asked about my idea about the approach to reform the criminal justice system, she heard what I said, and me and her decided to take in where they put us at tables with different, where you would sit down and think tables or groups, and me and her sit down, and many of the ideas that we wind up talking about, she wind up developing them out of a campaign and eventually became a candidate for Wayne County. She had her own ideas, not to say I had some great ideas and she ran off with them. She had her own ideas and she did a great job in taking and developing those. But we started off in the basement of a church in Detroit, and we met periodically. And then we started taking and interacting with each other on Facebook, etc. And even though she didn't take and win the position here in Wayne County, she gained it national recognition. And then she was offered the position of a county prosecutor, a county prosecutor whose candidacy we supported in Washtenaw County. She was invited to take and join here, so she's second in command there. And today she's one of the single most influential women in the state of Michigan. So she has a very promising career. But outside of that, when you look at the policies, they have come up with all sorts of creative policies, you know, in addition to taking and having created conviction, integrity, and expungement unit. They take and allow both the victim and the perp of a crime to take and be able to amend and to make each other whole again. Where if a person does something to a person, then that person can be consulted about how they feel this nonviolent situation can be resolved. And then after those demands are made, they give the perp an opportunity to take advantage of that. And if that person take advantage and fulfill all the requirements, then the prosecutor would agree to drop the charges, not to take and go forth with a jury trial. And so this person never realized or have a conviction, because they resolved it in the community. So not only is the one party, the victim is restored, but they give an opportunity even to restore the perp, so that that person don't go on after having served time in prison and get out of prison and cause more harm, or take and continuously be affected by the state because of that conviction. You know, even though we use this term, returning citizen, once you're convicted in the United States, you are no longer a citizen of the United States, okay? Because you never come back home with your constitutional rights intact. You don't have the right to bear arms anymore. That Second Amendment is taken from you. And for a while, you don't even have the right to assembly, you know, and association. You can't just associate with anyone. You know, there are guys that we try to take and provide resources to in reentry programs, and they parole officers say you can't go to the reentry program because there are other convicts there. It's ludicrous. This is the only place, the only entity that's providing resources and services to a person coming out of prison that might have been in prison for a long term, to take and get him or her back. And they're going through these technicalities and saying that, hey, there are other peoples there. I can remember I wanted to attend a public hearing for a gentleman that was in prison. And I knew this guy while I was in prison. I remember I used to be on top of him about going to school, getting this, because I was a teacher aide while in prison at one point. And so I worked it with this guy in prison. So here he is finna go to the parole board. It meant something to me to be there for him. It meant something for him for me to be there. And my parole officer told me, you can't go. And I'm saying, we at a prison. And he was like, and I'm saying, there'll be prison officials there, the parole board members. What wrong can I do? And he was like, you can't go there. You ain't supposed to have association with another prisoner. So I couldn't even act as an advocate for another guy coming out of prison while I was on parole. You know, so this is important to work with these people. I for a while, I tried to consult with a candidate for the Wayne County Sheriff's position. I tried to impress upon him that there, just like the school to prison pipeline, there's a pipeline from the county jail to the state prison, and it doesn't necessarily have integrity in it. And the integrity that's missing in that pipeline is the person that's in the county jail that is unemployed or chronically underemployed, or the homeless person, or the person that is dependent upon substance, or the person that has bad mental hygiene. When those categories of people find themselves in the county jail, they're more vulnerable almost than any other part of the county jail population, and they're more likely than anybody else to be put in the pipeline to go to prison, simply because of those categories, because of so much societal bias. There's a bias against the person that's homeless. There's a bias against the person that's substance dependent, etc. And the longer you stay in a county jail, the more likely judges and others are accepted to take and send you to prison, acceptable to send you to prison. You know, so the person that normally get out on bail, they stand a good chance that during the disposition of the case, that they're going to put you back in the community because you're demonstrating that you still have ties in the community. This is why we advocate against cash bail system. It not only take and rob people who are already poor, okay? It has nothing to do with your threat to society. The judge is like, you know, you don't even have a job, you may not come back. But he don't say that for the person that got some money. He don't say that about the person that has a good paying job. They're like, you'll be back. So we give you a personal bond. But the poor person that can't even afford the bond, they take and put him or her on a bond, and the person is sitting there in the county jail, costing the county thousands of dollars just sitting there over the months that they're there. They lose their home. A poor person, you know, being in jail is a catastrophe for a poor person. It means the loss of your car. It means the loss of your home or your apartment, your job. It means your insurance, your credit. All of that is just going down the waste. Even if you come out being vindicated, you know, it's all gone to waste. We hear rich people say, where can I pick back up my reputation? But how about that poor person? How could they pick up their damn life after having been subjected to even momentary incarceration in the county jail have serious consequences? That's why our veterans represent the largest recidivism inside the county jails, because their medication is cut off. There's a federal statute that says that the person that's going into county jail as a veteran or anyone that's on Medicaid, the feds say we don't pay their medical. That's off. So when they get out, it takes a while before their health care is cut back on. Yeah. But if you are somebody suffering from a mental illness, you don't have that damn time. So you wind back up in the county jail. And this is why your veterans are constantly going in and out. And so, and remind you, we got millions of people that go into the county jails, and most of them are repeat. There are more people that goes in our county jails than our state prisons, okay? At any given time, we can have as many as 11 million people in this country going in and out of the county jails at any given time in this nation. And so, and the effect that has on the economy, the effects that have on individual lives, and we wonder why we have so much stress. The answer ain't about always penalizing. This is the problem of our society. We live in a society where we're incapable of being able to have to forgive people, and we teach each other, don't repent, don't be contrite, because being contrite means consequences. You know, which is kind of contradictory. The first form of prison was what was called penitentiary. It had the concept of being repentant, but now it's like, you know, don't do that. That have consequences.
Okay, I hear you. What do you think we can do to, what can we do to keep juvenile violence down, or to give young people another path?
One thing clearly is to treat children well. No child is born bad. No child, absolutely no child is born bad. You know, there's a unique statement that I was thinking about in the Quran the other day. In the Holy Quran, when Christ, when Mary, the mother of Jesus, may Allah be pleased with her, when she's questioned about the baby, where did you get that baby from? And in the Quran, Jesus is defending his mother. And one of the statements that Jesus is making in the Holy Quran is that I am a command of God. You know, God commanded me, you know, be and I am. And his position was that, and he took and made me a sign both in this life and in the hereafter. And he made me not to be a burden on my mother. not to be a burden on my mother. No child is born a burden on the society. We are burdens on the child. The child is not a burden on us. Whatever in that child is a result of us. Taking a child and putting a child inside of a prison is no different than a woman taking and deciding to take an abort. So if you think you're different because you are not aborting a child, but you're abusing a child, you still on the same plateau. And I don't say that about anyone that's committing abortion, because sometimes people make those decisions for other reasons. But I'm using that in a narrow sense, of someone, the argument being made that women are just throwing away their fetus. Well, this is what we are doing with children when we say that child made a mistake, so let's just hide him from us. Let's hide him or her from us. Internally, perpetually, we never want to see him or her again. Well, what you're saying is you never want to see your mistakes again. You never want to see the harm that you done caused. So if there's a church, if there's a priest that molesting children, if there's an educator at the university that's taking advantage of children, if there's someone in law enforcement that's taking advantage of children, if there's a parent, if there's a family friend, if there's an uncle or aunt, if there's someone that has abused a child, you saying let's hide all of that the way we've been doing. Put it under the rug. That's a family secret. And we saying it's a nation secret. Put them all in prison. So we had at least, by the time the United States Supreme Court made a ruling, we had at least a minimum of almost 3,000 children in America's prison. We was doing a damn good job in hiding our crime. Why we are taking and being a moral authority in other places in the world, whether it's in Iran or North Korea or Africa or China, we were hiding our own damn garbage in America's prison. Not that the children are that. This is what we do when we send children to prison. You're hiding you. You're hiding your fault. Like the child the other day, a few months ago, they say they got the parents on trial because of how so much neglect is being reported in that case. Well, that's the truth about most of these cases with children. That's the truth in most of these cases, but normally the only person that's left carrying the rap is the child, the person that's most likely incapable of representing him or herself. Who in this country is affected by poverty more than any other category? Children. Children are the most impoverished class or category in this society. And there are some consequences of that poverty. Children are the ones who are most neglected. We spend more money. We spend more money on prisons and other places of punishment than we do places of learning. If we had a system, if we had an Ayatollah here in this country that said that, hey, we got a minister of culture or some sort, and the minister of culture say that you have to have some a level of education going on in this country relevant to, we got to balance some things. We don't need nobody to force us to do that. Our consciousness should tell us that we should be balanced. We unbalanced. Look at the number of people in this country. We have a nation inside of a nation or outside of a nation that is formally incarcerated, formally convicted. And we say to those people, you're not employable. So we now suffering, and we blame it on everything but what we done. We say we have a shortage. Nobody want to come to work. That's a lie. People want to come to work. I want to come to work, and I got a master's degree to say that I can work. I have a skill set that say that I can work. I taught classes in prison. I had more people in the classroom than I was told that should be in the building. When I taught classes, they took and told me that I was in violation of a fire code. So many inmates piled into the room to take and learn law from me. They said, hey, you over capacity. So I said, give us a bigger room. They said, no, you're missing the point. They say you over capacity. There's more people in your classroom supposed to be in the building. They say you have violated the fire code. Okay, those same guys that learned law in prison, that are well learned paralegals, that caused Jackson Community College to become the single largest producer of paralegals in the state. Those paralegals that came out of Jackson prison, those paralegals are capable of working for any attorney here in Detroit or anywhere else in the state of Michigan. But many times, and I showed up in an attorney's office, as soon as I mentioned I had been incarcerated, he was doing one of these numbers to get me out the door. Okay? Many times we are not being given an opportunity because of these formal convictions. So we done created a society that perpetuates. This is a form of state violence. So we never take into consideration the level of stress that exists in our society just from the people who are returning back from prison. That man and that woman, do you know what I witnessed at the expungement fairs? I witnessed husbands and wives and children where one, either the husband or the wife, is in tears because of an incident that occurred in their youth that's affecting their present family. Before they got married, before they had that child, now the husband and the wife is affected by the other one's mistake that happened when the other one was a young child. The child is being affected by the parent, one of the parents. They say, hey, I had a loan from the bank to get a house. They found out about my conviction and took it. So the person is there at the expungement fair saying, please help me. Please help me. In tears. In tears. I seen a guy that was gay, and he said the police took and stopped him, and because they learned of his sexuality, they abused him and then took and just brought charges on him. They were subsequently, he got the arrests and everything, and he said his life has been destroyed since then, And he said it was destroyed. So they had their, I seen that when I was incarcerated, where someone is thrown into jail or something because of his or her sexuality, and they think, well, we're going to teach you a lesson. We'll put you in that situation where you can get raped, and that would teach you to be a man.
That's crazy.
So
That's
but if you get in a group of law enforcement people, they don't think it's crazy unless you want to talk about it in the public. But as long as they in their circle, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. They don't want to tell you, that we all took and shot at a man and did target practice while he had his back to us, running 10, 15, 20 miles an hour away from us, and we all shot him like a running rabbit. They just tell you, hey, he pulled a gun on us. Well, when did he pull a gun? 15 minutes before that incident, 15 minutes before he took off and ran. So it's always looking for justification that we give them. And they're used to that pass, and when they don't get that pass, they're upset like babies. They're upset. So how can you not give us immunity? How could you hold us accountable for killing people? That's what we're supposed to do. I suggest to a guy that's running for office that, hey, how about we take and promulgate an idea that a person that's given a firearm, that's put in a law enforcement, shouldn't take and hold a firearm until after maybe 2 years of working in the department, until he or she done learned how to deal with the public without a firearm, where they're competent in themselves, not in that weapon. We don't give weapons. We don't give a torch to a welder until he learned how to use it.
Okay.
So how in the hell do you get a firearm that can kill somebody before you know how to use the damn thing?
Oh, that's true.
You're scared of everybody you come in contact with. So you kill a black woman because you're afraid of her. You kill a black man because you're afraid of her. You kill a black child because you're afraid of him, okay, or her. You kill the bisexual or the homosexual. You kill any and everything that don't fit your description, but you feel that I'm crazy to suggest that you not be given a gun until you learn how to take and use your human skills.
Yeah, that could definitely raise the standards. Okay, we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to move into our lightning round. We ask a series of questions of every guest about how they live and do things in and around the city of Detroit. And the first question is, how do you practice self-care?
I wake up in the morning. I'm a Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. Self-care is a central part of the Islamic faith and practice. I pray 5 times a day at the very minimum. I take and spend time in reading scripture and meditating over its words. I reflect upon the attributes of our Creator, and try to imagine how if we were to act upon some of those attributes, whether it be Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, mercy, one mercy, Rahman, which is inclusive, or the Ar-Rahim, which is exclusive. How if I acted up, like Rahman, the mercy is a mercy that is unconditional. We explained in the Quran that this is a mercy that Allah has applied to himself, to all of his creation, unconditionally. And even before the need arrives, it's so inclusive that there is no, anyone asks for it is available. But the exclusive mercy is that is, Rahim is relevant to those in the hereafter. Just contemplating that, and then I'm realizing some of us think that we own Rahim. Some of us like, you don't get this one. You don't belong to the exclusive club, and we definitely ain't getting the one that's inclusive. We're not inclusive, but we're exclusive. That's God's province. Leave it to God. So just contemplating upon our Creator's attributes is very educating and culturing. I'm still a runner. I'm 64 years old, and I still get out. I mentioned to the young lady that's sitting over there, that's a graduate from Eastern Michigan University. One of the spots I run through is the University of Eastern Michigan University's park. They got a park there. I run through there. I get chased by the geese here and there, but I'm there in the park, and whether I'm living here in Detroit, whether I was living in Taylor, I'm running in the urban area. When I came home, I used to run every morning with a pit bull. I used to run down Goddard. Is that Goddard?
Yep.
I used to all the way up to Beach Daily from one end of Goddard to the other. But I had a beautiful pit bull that I used to run with, Jada, my nephew's pit bull, and she used to love it. I just had problems with her if I tried to turn around and go back home. She didn't want to. She just run. She'd run like a hound dog, and I loved it too. So
Okay.
those are things I
And
do.
other than the Quran, what are you reading?
Um, I'm trying to get in law school, so I intend to apply for law school this fall.
Okay.
I intend to apply for law school. I take and read some of everything, all kind of social science work. A lot of the things that I'm advocating around, like the cash bail system, is based upon research. It's not just opinion that we have. It's based upon research. And so the social issues that I advocate around, just like this concern abolishing life without the possibility of parole for children, this is based upon research. I know all of the juvenile lifers here in Michigan that has been released from prison, and quite few of them that live here in Wayne County and some of the surrounding counties. I'm in contact with them, and I see, people who were once children who had committed horrific crimes. They are some of the most socially active individuals in our community. We have one gentleman right here in Inkster that literally feed the community there every Saturday morning. You can show up at his place and he pass out food. A truck comes to his place and lay the food down on pallets, and he use formal incarcerated people along with other people in the community and pass out food every Saturday morning. We have a young lady that came home, and she started an organization to first start taking and providing resources to fellow juvenile lifers. Then she started providing the same services to others in the community.
Okay.
We have others that's literally the directors of organizations, for reentry programs for returning citizens, etc.
So there's lots of research out
yes,
there.
they live in life.
Yeah.
They living a good life. I call some of these guys, and most of them always got daddy duty because
Yeah.
they're having kids, and now they enjoying fatherhood or motherhood.
Okay.
You know,
What are you listening to?
um, I like music, and I have always been fond of conscientious music. I love Gil Scott Heron. Are you familiar with Gil
Yes.
Scott? I love Jill Scott. I love um, India Ari.
Okay.
Um, 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 any kind of music that is conscientious, where it takes in, Curtis Mayfield, I still love his work. Donny Hathaway. Um, I love music that take and cause you to think, and sometimes it leaves me thinking for months, like I can remember some of Curtis Mayfield lyrics. There's where he said there's a joker loving one brother and killing another, and Gil Scott, where he takes and make mention about the people's taking contracts out for the man. He talking to the young brothers in the street that's using the guns and killing each other, and so he referred to them as the person that's taking the contract out for the man. He's saying to all those that they haven't killed or locked up, those you taking care of the rest, And so I kind of appreciate, people that, they provoke you to think about, our contemporary, and that's what I consider an artist. An artist is someone that make you think, that make you, you kind of
Wonder what's going on.
put your head around it,
Yeah. I imagine you probably don't, but what are you watching? I imagine you don't watch a lot of TV.
When I was in prison, I was always doing something that I didn't allow myself leisure time, and now I remind myself that this is part of creativity, is to take time and to watch a movie and to look at a director's, because I respect directors. I respect what they are able to do with characters that they take and try to bring live, different, roles and so forth. So I appreciate that. I appreciate them taking and learning about the psychology, the sociology, etc., that comes and taking and putting in a movie. And so sometimes I take and tell myself, hey, to get my creative energies flowing, I cut on a movie and just sit down and watch a movie. So I approach a movie quite differently than I would have when I was a kid. I used to come to all the theaters here downtown in Detroit, the Palm Theater, the Adams, the Fox, and I used to watch, James Bond and 007, all the action, the karate movies of Bruce Lee and all of that. But as I growed up, it wasn't just about the entertainment. It was about the creativity of the artists, the directors, and so forth. And so, yes, I take some time and just, take and catch me a movie and enjoy what is creatively being displayed and how the author is really bringing the character out and so forth.
Okay. And the last question is, where can we find you?
I am always available if you're looking at activities in terms of grassroots organizations, whether it's protesting about the cash bail system. We had a program around bail black mamas out of jail, or whether it's about advocating for juvenile lifers without parole, or taking and trying to sit down and make sense with people in law enforcement to try to get them to take and understand. Sure, you can label us as anti-police, but remember that road started in a very harmful place, which most of you wouldn't know it but for somebody pointing it out to you. So I can be, present with people in law enforcement where we're not taking and trying to cause them harm, but where we're trying to take and help them take and understand that you can put other tools in your toolbox other than a gun and other than a pair of handcuffs or these harmful approaches. There are other tools that you can use. There's, cross-discipline is not a disease. It's not a disease for an attorney. It's not a disease for a doctor. And it's not a disease for anyone in law enforcement. All of us cannot take it when we experience a harm, shout to the top of our voice, lock them up forever. If we all done that, where would we all be? Right where we at today?
Trump rally.
Thank you. And I was encouraged with the Detroit police, the new chief of Detroit police. But yeah, you experience an adversity. A member of your force was killed. And there's no justification for that. But there's no justification for advocating for everyone to take and be locked up forever and never let out, mandatory sentences. These things have caused us harm, and they cause more harm in the black community than they do anywhere.
But are you on social media or anything?
I recently, just the other day, I took and deleted my Facebook page. Okay, I am on LinkedIn. I'm active on campus, even though I graduated from the University of Michigan. I'm active on campus. I'm active here in Detroit. I'm active in Washtenaw County, in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Taylor. I'm active here in Michigan. For those who know me or know other people that I associate with, it's not hard to take and find me. I'm very visible. I'm very active. I use my voice. I consider myself to be an activist, and I use my voice. I'm here, whether it's downtown Detroit, in the city of Detroit, whether it's on the east side or west side. I visit mosques all over the city of Detroit. I sleep in some of the mosques. I've been sleeping in a mosque right there in Highland Park for the last several weekends, where the Muslims are coming and sit down and giving each other assignments of where you're going and giving fellow Muslims reminders about the faith, etc. I'm very, I attend mosques here in Detroit, in Dearborn, in Brownstown, in Taylor, in Ypsilanti.
You out here. People can find you out here in these streets.
I'm here. I'm not isolated. I'm very much active. Whether it's Michigan Live or Michigan United or Safe and Just Michigan, I'm in all of these different organization circles. I'm learning from them, and I'm taking and trying to share ideas that I have, like what I may mention to you about the county jail, identifying, putting some integrity in that pipeline. But what's dear to my heart is how we treating children in the criminal justice system. We want to take and ask the people in the state of Michigan, please abolish the possibility, even the possibility of putting a child away for the rest of his or her life.
Okay. And we're going to stop right there. Okay. Thank you for coming back, Baraka. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me back again.
Yes,
I really
sir.
appreciate that. And
there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Edward Baraka Sanders, advocate for juvenile offenders, advocate for changing our justice system here in the United States and making it more fair and accessible. You all have been listening to the Distinctly Detroit podcast. We really appreciate your listening in. Please, you can find us wherever you get your pods. Please rate, leave a comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Distinctly Detroit podcast. This is a production of the University of Michigan Detroit Center, and you can find us anywhere you get your pods. Please rate, review, and subscribe. This podcast is directed and produced by Marlon Franklin, edited by Taylor Henniger, with writing contributions by James Neely and Leah Allen. Thank you for listening.